enters the woods, she crosses the threshold, she enters the unknown world that she does not have experience with.
And then I realized that it all fits together to tell the story of the plan of salvation.
If I didn't read fairy tales, then I would never have found what I do in things like Shakespeare and Homer and all the other great works. I would never know what they're worth if I hadn't read fairy tales.
I am Porter, the host of Striving Higher to Inspire. Today I have with
Peter?
Addie,
Henry,
Today we're going to talk about the fantasy world of fairy tales. We're going to talk about how fairy tales can help us through our lives and continue even after we are grown up. Peter sent us this story of Little Red Cap. We're going to have Peter explain the story.
All right, so the reason I chose this story was first of all because my mom suggested that. That was the story that she suggested. And in case anybody's wondering, we got this off of the Gutenberg project. That's the source that we have for this. So if you guys want to go and check it out, you can look it up there.
I believe that this was the oldest version of the story that you found. Why did you choose that?
Well, long story short, you have this person named Charles Perrault, who I believe it was during Victorian era. The French court was really having moral issues. So he took these fairy tales that these two German people wrote and he changed them and adapted them, giving them morals. So, like, you have, for you to use Little Red Riding Hood, you have Little Red Riding Hood never go out in the woods alone. Don't do that. But what he did unintentionally was there's so much in the stories that you don't see if you're reading for the morals. It's like there's a whole second half to Little Red Riding Hood, which you do not get in the common version we have today. And that was because of Charles Perrault. It's kind of like taking the story of Medusa and saying, instead of Perseus killing, it was Perseus, right? I'm not getting this wrong. Yeah. Instead of Perseus killing Medusa, Medusa sees how ugly she really is in the reflective shield, and realizes that she shouldn't kill people. And Perseus and Medusa walk off happily together. And the moral of this story is even if you're ugly, you should still be nice. That's essentially what Charles Perrault did. So that's why I went for this version specifically. Everyone probably knows the story of Little Red Riding Hood, where Little Red Riding Hood goes into the woods. Their wolf gets eaten, or the grandma gets eaten by the wolf, and then it eats Little Red Riding Hood, and so on. So the second part is that you miss is about Little Red Riding Hood or Little Red Cap, who met the wolf again and then saw the wolf for what it was. So I was reading this and I was trying to figure out because I saw all these different images in it. The wolf is obviously evil, and I saw that Little Red Cap didn't recognize the evil. I saw random pieces, and then I realized that it all fits together to tell the story of the plan of salvation. So you have Little Red Cap, who could be us, and one day her mother says to her, "Come, Little Red Cap, here's a piece of cake and a bottle of wine. Take them to your grandmother. She is sick and weak, and they will do her well. Mind your manners and give her my greetings. Behave yourself on the way, and do not leave the path, or you might fall down and break the glass." So that's a little section in there. And if you notice, Little Red Riding Hood has one instruction: don't leave the path. Don't eat the forbidden fruit in the Garden of Eden. Little Red Riding Hood goes and she meets a wolf, and she doesn't recognize that the wolf is evil. It says that she did not know what a wicked animal he was and was not afraid of him. She talks with the wolf a little bit and tells him who she is and where she's going, which, if this were Charles Perrault here, then he would say, "Oh, well, don't let your information get stolen by people." You have the part where he says, Little Redcap, just look at the beautiful flowers that are all around us. Why don't you go and take a look? Which is inviting her to break the one thing that she was told to do. And then she does it. She falls. Eventually, she gets to her grandmother's house, but she doesn't know that the wolf has gone in there and eaten her grandma. She goes in. Again, she looks at her grandmother, and you have the classic, "Oh, grandmother, what big ears you have." And that is again, she's still not recognizing the evil. She's not recognizing the wolf. And then the wolf eats her. So it's a death. She's gone as low as she can go. She's died. There's nothing you can do. And then you have the hunter who comes in and kills the wolf. And the hunter saves both her and her grandmother by cutting her out of the wolf. And I can't explain this very well. This is something that's hard to explain, but I hope you guys are kind of seeing what I'm trying to say here. Is that you have Christ that then we've dead, we're doomed. And then you have Christ who comes and he atoned for us and he saves us from that death. And the important part about the second part is then you see how Little Redcap has learned. Little Redcap now recognizes evil. It says in the first paragraph of the next part, they also tell how Little Redcap was taking some baked things to her grandmother another time, when another wolf spoke to her and wanted her to leave the path. But Little Redcap took care and went straight to her grandmother's. So she learned right there is to never go off the path, never stray off the straight and narrow path. She tells her grandmother, and they lock the doors to stay safe. Have they have both learned actually about it. The wolf tries to come in. He's not able to. The wolf jumps on top of the house, so then it can eat Little Red Riding Hood as she leaves the house. But the grandmother saw that. They went to the stone trough and got a bucket and sausage, and they put it over the fire, and the smell of sausage arose into the wolf's nose. He sniffed and looked down, stretching his neck so long, which is kind of I see a snake right there. That's the thing that makes me think of that. So long that he could no longer hold himself, and he began to slide. He slid off the roof and fell into the trough and drowned. Like, you miss that whole part with the modern story, is you don't have that second part where you see how you've learned. You see how Christ has helped us, and now that he has helped us, we can work not necessarily by ourselves. We still have instructions, but we are able to progress more along in life. And one thing that I'm still trying to figure out a little bit, because I don't claim to know everything in this fairy tale. There's so much more that I don't know. I was kind of wondering why they killed the wolf in such a strange way. But if you think about it, that's another image of a burial. He's being buried with the stones in his stomach that were so heavy, the weight of his own sins were dragging him down, and he died.
I honestly did not see that, like the parable you shared about, like, or that it could be like the plan of salvation. I did not see that. That was something I did not notice at all. I was trying to get morals out of it, not a simile, I guess. But that was really good.
Yeah, we've kind of lost. This is something that I've been trying to relearn, but we've, like, all of us, we read like moderns. Like, that's how we read. And there is a significant difference reading like a modern than reading like a medieval person. So that was more of this is how they would have read it, and this is how this story was written or collected, because it wasn't composed by the Grimm brothers. It was collected by them. They came and they found all these folk tales and they all wrote them down. So it's interesting how if you look at these stories and even myths and stuff like that, you still see Christ in there. You still see fragments of truth in there. So that's something that I've been learning how to read and how to pick that out, how to see the story, I guess.
C.S. Lewis once said that all stories, all myths have truth, but not all of them are true. And you could say that even the story of Christ is a myth, with the difference that it is the true myth, and it is the one that actually happened and actually defines our lives. And you could say that all myth is an attempt to shine light on truth.
I was actually just about to look up another C.S. Lewis quote about how I was thinking while Peter was talking that it's reading fairy tales is a skill that has to be learned and it takes a while. I've been reading fairy tales my entire life, and only recently have I started really understanding them, like reading them for what they're worth. And this is a quote I found by C.S. Lewis. It says, "When I was 10, I read fairy tales in secret and would have been ashamed if I had been found doing so. Now that I am 50, I read them openly. When I became a man, I put away the childish things, including the fear of being childish and the desire to be very grown up." And I just love that because that's really what fairy tales do, is they aren't so much for children as they are for the whole person, heart and soul.
Yeah, it's definitely a mistake to think that fairy tales are only for young children because these things are ancient. They've been around forever, and there must be a reason for that. And it's just not just because it's for little kids. It's because all of us, no matter how old we are or how young we are, need to hear some of the things that are contained in this that we can't fully learn without the story.
There's also like the practical value of fairy tales. Like if I didn't read fairy tales, then I would never have found what I do in things like Shakespeare and Homer and all the other great works. I would never know what they're worth if I hadn't read fairy tales.
As I was reading this fairy tale, I noticed a few things. I really like to look at the symbolism in the thing, like the items in the story, whereas Peter looks at the kind of allegory, you could say. And I also really love archetypes and the hero's journey. In case you don't know what the hero's journey is, basically, it's the story of a soul becoming better. And it is so cool. It follows a specific pattern and many, many like famous books, famous stories, not so famous books and stories. Even our lives follow this pattern. If we go through this fairy tale, we will see the hero's journey. Little Redcap starts in her normal world, her ordinary world, and she's happy there. But, she needs to do something. She needs to help her grandmother who's not feeling well. So her mother asked her to bring her bread, cake, and wine, which I think is cool because what is something important that involves bread and wine that we that we are involved in regularly? I don't know about you, but that sounds like the sacrament to me. She enters the woods, she crosses the threshold, she enters the unknown world that she does not have experience with. She quickly meets someone who's trying to prevent her from going to the normal world. She meets the wolf. And the wolf, he tempts her, he tells her to leave the path and to not go where she needs to go. And she does for a time. She eventually does get back on the path, clearly, since she ends up at her grandmother's house. But she leaves the path, which is, not good. He goes to the house and he eats her grandmother, and then she comes and she notices that something's a little off, but she still doesn't recognize the wolf as the evil he is, like Peter was saying. And he eats her, and this is the abyss. This is like the darkest moment. So she's stuck somewhere. This is dark. This is a dark time for her. The hunter comes along, and he realizes that the wolf has eaten Little Red Cap and her grandmother, and he helps them out. And Little Red Cap lets us know that that was the abyss by like talking about how dark it was in there. But now she's out. She's come out of the abyss, and she is hopefully changed and made stronger and made better because of it. They put, sew the rock into the wolf, and she tries to make things better by preventing that wolf from hurting other people. And then she eventually goes home and she has the cycle of the hero's journey. We do learn that she has changed, that her moment of time in the abyss has transformed her in the second part when she recognizes the wolf for what it is.
This is just one fairy tale. Why are fairy tales like this important? We might have already talked a little bit on this. Why would you say that fairy tales should be read not with our modern look, but like with a medieval look?
I'd say that part of it is because we see things differently than they did back then. So the way we see these fairy tales is through like what we've experienced, what we've learned, where they learned completely different things, just very, very different things.
Some of it is that there are some stories that can be read for morals and stuff like that, but there's other stories, I'm trying to think of some right now, that really don't make sense. Like they don't make sense unless you know how to read them, which like I'm thinking of the book Dracula right now by Bram Stoker. That is really confusing if you don't know really how to read it. So it's something that we more or less have kind of lost the ability to read like these people did. I enjoy reading, trying to find the Christ images, trying to find the stories inside the stories. And I feel like we miss that now, a lot of it. But like there are a couple people who have been able to try and recreate that, like Tolkien and C.S. Lewis. It's something that are not as popular anymore, I would say, because we don't know how to read them.
So we kind of lost the language, is what you're saying. We've lost this language of reading.
I think of it as less if we've lost the language so much as we've lost the art of reading. Because reading is something that everyone can do. Like it's not a rare thing, but you can teach someone to draw without teaching them to express themselves. Same as you can teach someone to read without teaching them how to really study.
To understand what they're reading the way it was meant to be understood.
Also, in the medieval era, you probably didn't have very many books, so you probably couldn't. So if you had a story like this, you would probably read over it and over it. And now that we have so many books in this society that we just can't have that experience where we read and read. I know that I have a bookshelf in there that's full of books that I haven't read. So maybe that's also a thing that we don't reread as much stuff. And that's for super fast readers like Addie.
I mean, like Little Red Cap was an oral tale. We had a lot of orally told tales, which is another thing that I think we don't have as much of anymore, that we should have more of, is having these orally said tales. Because there's like the most simple example is taking a poem and then reading it in your head and then reading it out loud. It sounds so different. Some stories are just meant to be read aloud or to be said aloud.
I don't have experience with this yet because I am not a parent, but I have heard a lot of people tell me that reading fairy tales out loud to their kids, it connects them. That's the best way to describe it, is that they're just bonding.
Having my dad tell stories of his life has also really like helped me understand him, and sometimes it's just a good laugh, and sometimes he has a little moral that goes along with his story.
That's why I think fairy tales work so well, is because they are so old. So many generations have learned through these fairy tales that when you get a good fairy tale like Little Red Cap or that everyone knows, then it just connects them. Because anyone that I know can go talk to their great grandparents about this story and they all know the same story.
And if you think about it, it's like there were so many ways for these stories to get lost. on their travels through time to get to us. It's pretty incredible we have them. And it probably means that it's because there's something in it that's worth knowing, that's worth having, which is why we have it now. It's because people saw something in the story that they that resonated with them and they want to share it with their children and their children want to share it with their children. And so we have these stories now, and now it's up to us to find out why this resonates with us so that we can share it with our children and these stories will just keep continuing.
Yeah. So while you were talking, I went and searched up what scripture meant just to see. So it comes from the Latin word scriptura, which means a writing. So in all reality, these fairy tales could be scripture in that sense. It's a writing. It can bring you to, even though it's not in a book of scripture, you can still find God in it, as we saw with Peter and as Addie shared, and we all found these scripture references or similes on these.
All stories lead us to God. All good stories, I should say.
I feel like the stories are kind of a buffer that get us to God. They lead us to truth, and all truth points to God, is what I've found with them.
I mean, there are some books that can never lead you to God and will destroy your faith. But if you find those good books, they totally help you go to God.
I don't know. I mean, I've read some pretty weird books and some that I really, really didn't like, but I've found things to learn in all of them. Even if it's what not to do, there's always something to learn from it.
Well, we have talked about fairy tales now, and if you are looking for the similes of God, then you can definitely find God in them. You can find Christ in any story, and it just takes a little bit of looking into and reading with a different mindset than we do in our modern day. I'm Porter, your host, and today I had.
Peter?
Addie,
Emery,
If you would like to contact us, we have a email, strivinghightertoinspire@gmail.com. You can contact us there or comment in wherever you're listening to this podcast. Thank you. Bye.